first thing we'll do is open this meeting, take a roll call, then we're gonna need to take a roll call vote to go into executive session. Then we need to open executive session with, you guessed it, a roll call, and then we can have a presentation. Call the meeting is open, roll call, Gina Stino,
Present.
Ren Collins,
Present.
Mark Maggi,
Present.
Ellen Mar,
Present.
Mary McGoldrick,
Present.
Meg Wheeler, and Rob Hillman.
Present.
I am present. So, you'll bear with me for a second. To say the right thing to go into executive session, which we do not do very often. So I'm gonna ask for a motion that or I'll make the motion that the advisory committee go into executive session under exemption number 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation, we're not going in for litigation on the bargaining. The public body and the chair so declares. I so declare that it would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining. So we will go into executive session if the motion is seconded and passes for the purposes of receiving an update on collective bargaining. So I have moved. Does anyone second?
I'll second.
I got Jean first. So we're going to have a live meeting someday so we can dispense with roll call votes. But until that day comes, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler, and Rob Hillman.
Aye.
I am an aye. Great. Okay. Just for you to note, Mike and Patrick may be joining us a little later. They both sent their have some conflicts, but they might be able to get to us a little bit later on. What that means while we're in executive, I cannot say. I have a Mark Cameron in the audience.
Part of the, Mark Cameron is part of the town hall committee, so he's the chair there with Phil Lear.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going into executive session and we'll see if we can be of service to him if he has anything he wants to talk to us about. But I don't have anything on the agenda about town hall unless it's ancillary to one of our other articles. So at this point, I think we should all go to the link that we've been provided for executive session. And what may be, in my case, more of an act of faith than anything else, click the link and hopefully we will all reconvene in executive. Does that work?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, see ya.
I don't know. I don't know.
just us.
I know. Mhm. Guess the others must not have saved their link at the ready.
Right, well, I always have my calendar up on one of my screens, so.
Ugh.
Actually, let me pull the agenda up. I don't have that up.
Beat ya.
That's not hard. That's like beating the horse that routinely comes into the race at 32-1. I'm gonna step away for just a second, excuse me.
Rob, quick question. Tim had emailed me and just asked if we could give him a heads up.
My intention, and I told him I'd get to him at 8 o'clock, and that's what we're gonna do.
Okay,
So, yeah, let's give him a heads up for sure, but I think we just get done what we can get done in the next 15 minutes, and then we have him in. You saw I sent him some questions, not all of which I intend to really take a deep dive into.
yeah, I saw those. Okay.
Yeah, when I thought about them afterward, I was, I don't think we want to be talking about legal advice given or taken, so. But, we'll see. I mean. I listened to the select board's discussion of this last night, and it's hard to characterize. I mean, words were spoken, but they didn't vote on it. There's some question whether it should be there, at least one member questioned whether it should be the select board's motion, which probably should be. It's
Yeah,
gonna be a
hold on
bylaw.
one second. Fran's trying to get a hold of me.
Do what you gotta do.
Hey,
World's
Fran.
best vice chair ever.
Okay, I'll let Michelle know.
So
Thank you.
Meg, did the young
Yeah.
man actually turn in, or does he want to talk to the committees?
My husband thankfully made it home and took over, so. We're going through a little bit of a not sleeping and fear of abandonment stage, so. He may still be up when this meeting's over.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Tell him I am too, Meg. It's okay.
I can't
I'll-
endorse the concept of adult children strongly enough. It's great.
We'll get there
So,
eventually.
Except the high school version where we're all staying up waiting for them and going out of our mind.
Oh, no, I'm talking post collegiate.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm there too. I still worry though.
Collins, Kennedy.
Rob, you can ignore my email. I was asking to be let in. I was listening to
Oh,
Meg.
here you are.
brag about being first into the meeting, and I was stuck out in purgatory waiting to be let in.
Hip at the post.
Gotta know the right route, Mark.
Ellen's here, Mary's here. Okay, we're all here. So having opened this meeting, we should be recording. We are. So at 7:48, declare us back in session in open meeting. And the order of business that there are two matters that we need to vote on relative to the labor contracts. One of them, there is in Article 4, the allocation of funds for one-time costs. That's subcategory 8. We had deferred on that. The number is now $200,000. So the motion would be, does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 4, item number 8 in the form it appears in the October 25 warrant, except that the amount shall be $200,000. Somebody want to make that motion and second it? We're going to be more conversation and open than anyone thinks is appropriate. So
So moved.
Jean moves,
Second,
Mary seconds. Any additional conversation, discussion? Very good. Then we'll vote that motion by roll call. Giannassino.
Aye.
Mike hasn't joined us. Fran Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy.
Aye.
Mark Maggi.
Aye.
Alan Marr.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. The ayes have it. I would like to jump to a related article that would be Article 12, removal of Cohasset Police Department from civil service. That was touched on briefly in executive. We also have the communication that we referred to from the chief explaining the basis for it, and we've been informed by Chris and the chief that the union has agreed to support the removal of the department from civil service, presumably for the reasons laid out in the chief's memo. Before we have a motion, does anybody have any sort of preliminary discussion? Fran?
I read the proposal by the chief. It was pretty thorough and he really dotted his i's and crossed his t's, but I wonder if I haven't heard any negatives on it, and I wonder if there are any. And what about the rule of unintended consequences? Has that been reviewed? And I don't know the answer to those questions. I've tried to talk to Chris a couple times, but I haven't been able to catch him.
He and I had a brief conversation about it. It's generally regarded as a net positive for the reasons in the chief's memo. And also, and I'll speak just very generally to this, as my office represents lots and lots of towns as labor council, is it takes you out of the Civil Service Commission, which is a slow and difficult tribunal sometimes. I don't want to insult them because I practice in front of them. So, but I think, even on their best day, they would concede that it's a slow process. And often the concerns that are raised there, the police employees aren't giving anything up because they're protected by their collective bargaining agreement. I don't think there are identifiable unintended consequences, Fran, but that's just me. Jennifer, anything further to that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said. I don't see any unintended consequences. The community that I just came from is in the process of removing their police department from civil service. It's very cumbersome and slow. It's not conducive to the hiring process for public safety. Another community that I worked for the town of Chatham for many years did not have civil service, and it was just a very different process is beneficial for everyone. So I don't see any unintended consequences for this.
Any other questions? Then if somebody could make a motion.
Question, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry, Patrick. I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
The memo from Chief Quigley references that the town of Cohasset could create kind of hiring guidelines and principles. So this presumes we would step in and create some sort of document that would probably be spearheaded by our HR head. But like, how much of a heavy lift is that? And could we get that in place pretty quickly? in time for when, when this gets approved.
Jennifer,
I
Michelle?
can jump in here. I'm sure this has already been thought about and it's an internal process. I don't think it would need approval. I'm not sure, I don't think it would need town meeting approval. So I'm sure it's been, thought out, and that once this there is a process to get it removed. So it has to go through the legislature after it goes to town meeting. But
Right, so there's time, there's a lot of time.
Right, and
to
I-
get the legislature to approve this, but in the background, like Kim Roy or someone's gonna have to be working on all the, what we are gonna put in place for testing, hiring
Exactly.
procedures, all of that background is gonna have to be going on so that we're ready to start up. from
and I
day
believe
one.
it's already been going on. I
Okay.
haven't been in those meetings, but I believe that they've already thought about it and they have an idea of what the process would be. But Chris could answer that question more specifically.
And I think the good news there, Patrick, is that there are plenty of towns who either have never been in or have been leaving. So there's plenty of templates around to steal good
Okay.
ideas and ignore bad ones. So, any further questions, comments? We have a motion in the form, what do we use? Does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 12 in the form it appears in the October 25th draft warrant?
So moved.
Fran? Second?
A second,
I'm sorry, who was that? Jean.
Jean.
So we have a motion and a second, vote by roll call. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye,
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick
Aye.
and Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. So Article 12 is approved. So we are scheduled at 8 o'clock to invite the proponents of the citizens petition regarding the harbor bylaw to speak to us. That being 3.5 minutes from now. I don't know that there's anything else that we can resolve in the interim, but why don't we do this? Can we just run through, and I'm looking at Ellen's very excellent minutes, just to see what it is we need to address. Article 2, unpaid bills, we're gonna need to deal with that. Stabilization to 3, we approved. Article 4, we have one more open issue. Capital improvement projects. We voted those. So Article 5 is done. Article 6, we have is not ready. Article 6 is, oh, that's the, is that the conservation? No, that's CPC. I thought we approved that. No, we did not. There were questions about the, well, we'll revisit it. So 6, we approved. 7, 8, 9. It's 10 is open, the wetlands protection bylaw. And I listened to the select board's meeting last night. And there doesn't seem to be any finality, although apparently the Concom may have voted on something. So we'll talk about that. 11, we approved. 12, we just approved. 13, we approved. We've got the 2 citizens petitions, 14 and 15. So I suspect what we should do is have the discussion about the harbor bylaw and then loop back through whatever open items we have, approve some minutes, talk about any updates from committees, and then make a determination whether we need to meet again, however briefly, next Wednesday night. Does that sound like good way to proceed. So I'm gonna. What happened to,
Do you want me to promote Tim Davis in?
oh, yeah,
And Mike
and-
Dick is also in the,
why is Mike
Attendees.
Dick here?
he's,
I mean,
he's
I
in
mean,
as
it's-
just an
It's a
attendee.
free country. I just, I don't think he's party to an agenda. We'll check in with him at some point. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
promote Tim.
okay,
And if you'll just excuse me for a second, I'll be right back.
Mary, thanks for the help as usual.
You're welcome, my friend.
Okay, am I on?
Hello, Tim.
Hello,
We're just gonna wait. Rob had to step out for a moment, so we'll just wait till he gets back.
okay.
Tim, where is it snowing?
Well, it's snowing somewhere and it will snow here sometime.
Yeah. You have
Without
the
any-
backdrop with snow, so.
Yes, it is. Well, that's one of the pictures I use so you can't see my messy office.
uh, I know Telluride had a bunch of snow in the past few days, so.
Yes, and I hope to be out there as well as Stowe. So that's
Nice.
where my winter travels are. Okay, can
Never
I
wrong
start now? I
there.
know you only wanted 10 minutes, so I'll start. Are you ready?
Well, give me a
No, we're waiting
second.
for Rob. Oh, Rob's
Oh, you're
I'm
fine.
back, and I'm unmuted and everything. So, we're turning our attention to the citizens petition, which is on the warrant as, draft as, Article 15. You've been provided with a draft of the bylaw that was circulated by the proponents, as well as, a section of the acts of 1953. I asked Tim to sort of, give us all, assume we don't know much, although I suspect everybody has a notion, to give us a sense of the issue and how this addresses the issue. And, well, we'll go from there. So, Tim, take it away.
Thank you. I could start with when Timothy Hatherley came over from England and acquired most of the property we're talking about from the Algonquin Indians, Chief Wampatuck. But I will fast forward to the Act of 1953 because there's relatively little that happened from that time till 1953, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts passed an act that essentially gave Cohasset jurisdiction over all of Cohasset Harbor. And Cohasset Harbor on all of the charts, government charts, is defined as essentially all those waters between the Glades and Whitehead that goes out to Massachusetts Bay and then from there to the Atlantic Ocean. So all of that water is Cohasset Harbor. In 1953, the Commonwealth gave Cohasset jurisdiction, governance jurisdiction for all of those waters by bylaw. And in 1953, there was a Cohasset bylaw that was passed that gave specific jurisdiction for part of that is essentially the channel from Cohasset Harbor that goes out by Whitehead. So what the new bylaw does is essentially put into a bylaw the jurisdiction that the 1953 Act of the Commonwealth gave to Cohasset. And that bylaw basically says that Cohasset has governance authority over essentially all of the activities in Cohasset Harbor. A little bit of the background, I think, Rob, you asked me what's the background, why we're doing this? In 2019, Scituate and the Scituate Shellfish Advisory Committee proposed a plan for putting an industrial oyster farm over about almost 40 acres of the water sheet of Cohasset Harbor, extending from Bassings Beach out to the low water line, and then beyond that for an industrial oyster farm. That property, all that land, the water sheet has been used for generations of Cohasset, Situate, and other South Shore folks for fishing, fouling, and navigation, which is part of Massachusetts law, but also sailing, paddle boarding, general enjoyment of that area. So what this bylaw does is it basically gives Cohasset the right, as it was said or stated in the 1953 Act, jurisdiction to govern all of that. And what we would hope that Cohasset would do is to provide that governance and keep that area open for conservation, preservation, and the enjoyment of all. Now, there are two bylaws actually that are going forward, and they are not, I just want to, Rob, I want to correct one thing. They're not Harbor Committee bylaws. There are two bylaws. One is a bylaw that the Harbor Committee did pass and send to the Select Board. The other one is a citizen petition bylaw, which essentially is the same, but it's a separate, they're two separate things. And the both of them will be considered by the Select Board. They're in the process of their deliberation. The citizen bylaw by law will be on the warrant. The one that goes to the Select Board, they will have the opportunity to either say this will be on the warrant or not. There are discussions going on between Cohasset and Situate as we speak, but the citizen petition bylaw will be on the warrant. And basically what that does is memorialize, if you will, the law that the Commonwealth gave to Cohasset for the governance of the harbor. So I could go on. Mary said 10 minutes. I said I could go for 3 hours, but I'll try and keep it brief. So I'll happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll open it to the committee for questions. I saw Patrick first. Then
Yeah,
Ellen.
Tim, so I've read the 1953 Act that you're referring to, and the way I read it is that it gives Cohasset police powers to make arrests or deal with legal issues in waters that are adjacent to Cohasset Harbor. I'm wondering what the legal basis is for Cohasset to take a jurisdictional bylaw and say, we control land that resides within Situate, and whether we have a legal opinion that says this is going to pass muster with the Attorney General's office, which this would have to do in order to become an effective bylaw for the town of Cohasset.
Okay, thank you. First of all, the Cohasset town council has reviewed this. And to answer your question, Rob, I don't know whether she's given an opinion on that, but she certainly reviewed it and been part of the process. The second thing is, what it says is the inhabitants of the town of Cohasset may, by bylaw, provide for the regulation and enforcement of rules and regulation for the operation, and it goes on and on and on. It's very broad as to what the authority is that is being granted to Cohasset, and the Cohasset council has reviewed it. Whether or not she's given an opinion, I don't know that, but in her opinion and the opinion of others, other council that's reviewed it, this is absolutely appropriate and is legal.
Well, I've been municipal council for something like 30 years, and municipal council gets asked to review a lot of things. And unless they've issued an opinion letter that says opinion letter at the top with a signature at the bottom, I don't see that as a clearance that this thing is going to answer Patrick's objection or mine, which was not objection, but question, is whether this is going to generate litigation, but we'll get to that. Does anybody else on the committee have questions, comments? Fran?
Yeah, it seems to me that this really talks, this bylaw basically talks about navigation and not particularly what people do. I sort of, Tim, I sort of take issue with the term industrial oyster farming. I would say commercial oyster farming is a little more appropriate, but industrial sounds pretty scary. This is sort of the future is aquaculture, is keeping things going. I personally don't think that that's a very good place for it, just because of weather-wise, tide conditions. I think they'll have some very difficult times with it. But I'm sorry, I have a bit of a problem with we can't control all of that water. It doesn't belong to us. It's basically part of Situate. It's Plymouth County. It's a different county even. I sort of think that I'd like to see a little more information before I opine any more than what I've just said.
Meg?
I think Ellen had hers first.
Ellen? Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. So Tim, I just have a question. You talked about the Cohasset, what are Cohasset waters? You said from the Glades to Whitehead to Mass Bay to the Atlantic. Is all Cohasset waters?
No, I said it's all Cohasset Harbor.
It's all Cohasset Harbor. So out the gangway, out the main channel. I think the last marker is close to mine. It's like, so all of that.
All of that water has been for over 100 years named as Cohasset Harbor.
Okay.
Now, there is, as Franny pointed out, there is a line that goes down, essentially down the channel, that separates two counties and two towns.
Right.
However, the waters are essentially Commonwealth waters. They aren't owned by either Cohasset or Situate. The property under it, to mean low water, is privately owned. From the Glades all the way around to Whitehead, it's privately owned. And originally what the folks wanted to put this, Franny, how would you call it? A commercial farm and not an industrial farm? I don't care what you call it, but take 40 acres that initially was on private property. And they were finally persuaded that Commonwealth law says you cannot use private property for your own use unless you have permission.
Right.
So now they wanted to do is move it off of that into further Commonwealth waters, but down below the low property line, low water line. And so what this does is basically give Cohasset jurisdiction over all of that water, as it was stated in the Act of 1953.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll stop now. Ellen's question, now it's Meg.
I'm almost afraid to wade into this because I'm highly unqualified to have this conversation, being neither an attorney nor a fisherwoman. But I'm curious, and this may be a question, Tim, that you can't answer or anyone can answer, but in section 2, that same section that you were referring to, that I think clearly says, gives Cohasset provides for the regulation and enforcement of rules and regulations for the operation of, it skips ahead to the mooring and anchoring of boats, lobster cars, or floats therein. I understand boats. I don't know what lobster cars are. That sounds like something my 5-year-old would make up, but floats I understand, I think, as well. And I remember back to the oyster farm sessions where I'm pretty sure they're underneath the water, not above. So I don't know if this actually would cover those, but I guess I would be curious as to how that little section right there doesn't potentially give us the right to control what goes in the water, because to me that sounds like it's giving us the right to control what goes in the water and blocks portions of the water. And again, that may be a question that no one can answer, but I'm really curious about that aspect of it.
Okay, well, one of the things, you never can be so specific in these things to cover everything, but it does talk about navigation and the safety of navigation in that area. So if you think about what would happen if there were 30 acres or 38 or 40 acres of commercial oyster farms on the sea bottom that raised up to several feet, you could not have sailing, fishing, swimming, any kind of navigation over there. It would be dangerous for opti sailors from the yacht club or young sailors from the sailing club to be sailing over there. If they were to capsize and go into that, it would be life threatening. So we're using all of these things as whoever in their wisdom put together the Act of 53, we're using that to try to bring together a bylaw that covers all of that to protect all of the citizens of the community, both Cohasset, Situate, and all the South Shore residents for that property that has been in use for hundreds of years. That's what we're trying to do. Yes, Franny.
Fran,
Yeah, I'm looking at a 1933 Coast and Geodetic Survey chart of Cohasset Harbor. It's number 242. And it goes all the way out past Minot Lake. It goes off to the north, way out north of the Grampus and Hogshead Rock. And it also includes the Situate Neck, which is what the Glades is now, and the waters east of that. So it says Cohasset Harbor. Now, obviously, all of that area is not Cohasset Harbor. It probably should say Cohasset Harbor and approaches. But as a mariner, I just can't fathom that is all Cohasset Harbor. And I think I don't know. I hope you haven't bitten off more than you can chew, because you're going to start telling us now that we can't fish for flounder out at Hogshead Rock. Because
nobody's going to keep you from fishing for flounder out there.
A silly analogy, but you know what I'm saying.
I understand. That's not the intention here, Franny, and I'm sure. And as you know, in this bylaw, there are the ability to have different variances to it. If somebody wants to apply to do, flounder fishing in Cohasset Harbor, they probably would get that opportunity. So that's not what this is all about.
Okay.
Mary.
Tim, do you have, or somebody else might as well, any idea of where Situate is in this process? For example, have the licenses been awarded yet? How many licenses are there, et cetera?
Situate was about to award licenses when the litigation from Friends of Bassing Beach essentially stopped them from doing that. The end of the litigation was that they agreed to stop issuing licenses. And those were licenses that were destined for private property around Bassing's Beach. So they agreed to stop there. And then after that, then they moved to outside of the Meanwhile water, which is not private property, it's more Commonwealth waters. They moved out there. Now what they want to do is go out there and not be on what they say is private property, what is private property, but out a foot beyond that, which at one point was a very healthy eelgrass bed, which I think you all know, eelgrass is a resiliency buffer to storm surge. And then we had a very healthy eelgrass beds out there. CSCR, this is anecdotal, and maybe you don't want to get into it, but anecdotal, CSCR did a study for Situate and for the Shellfish Commission on the eelgrass beds, and it was a very healthy eelgrass bed. 2 weeks after that report was issued, somehow green crabs got into the eelgrass beds and decimated them. You can't put oyster farms in eelgrass. So all of a sudden now the eelgrass beds are gone. And so that they think they can go put them out there. Anyway, that's a little bit of anecdotal. I'm probably over my 10 minutes now, but I'm happy to keep going.
But you got 10 minutes to present. We get all the time. We have to ask questions.
Keep me up till midnight, Rob.
The red light doesn't go on until the judges say so.
Okay.
Let's see. I had a couple of questions. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, and if there are discussions, I want to talk only about the fact of them and only very briefly. But you would refer to, even as we speak, there's a discussion with Situate. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
There was a meeting several weeks ago between two members of the Cohasset Select Board, two members of the Situate Select Board, and the town administrator and town administrator.
Okay, I think
Far
that's
as my-
about all
Pardon
I
me?
want to hear. I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. I don't want to get into the substance of the
No, I'm
conversation.
just saying they had that meeting.
Fine, and they're having another one now.
There is
Like
another
now,
one,
now.
I think is either today or soon, between
Okay.
two other members of the select board and and the same administrator and moderator or
Okay,
manager.
thank you.
I don't know the results of those.
And the other matter is, there had been litigation, but that had to do with a now abandoned, plan to install these things or permit these things or grant licenses between, mean high and mean low water.
Yes.
So you actually had a lawsuit that turned on the colonial ordinance. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a law from 1641. I've litigated it. It's great
Yeah.
fun. So it does show a certain lack of preparedness by the Situate proponents of this whole thing.
And
They
the
didn't understand.
land court judge admonished them for exactly that.
Yeah, that's not so good. So it seems to me that the question, Patrick, I'd be interested in your reaction to this. The question turns on looking at the 53 statute and trying to decide, what does the term Cohasset Harbor mean? And would the legislature have knowingly granted town A jurisdiction over a portion of water in this case that resides in otherwise in town B? And I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm sure that there's some fourth year lawyer at the Attorney General's office who's going to have to figure that out. And then the question is, if it is approved, how long does that grind on for? Those are just observations. I could probably make more, but I'll stop now. I think unless anybody has any further questions for Tim, perhaps we should engage in some deliberation over how we're going to approach the article that's before us. I have some thoughts. Do you want me to keep Tim promoted in case anybody has a question on the fly? I think that would.
Well, I can just, if you would, I'll just clarify.
Yeah,
things.
no, go ahead. If there's any
There are
loose ends,
two-
please.
There are two two bylaw proposals. They're identical. One of them was approved by the Cohasset Harbor Committee and submitted to the Select Board. The other one was a citizen petition, which was signed by almost 400 residents of Cohasset in favor of this petition. So there are two of them going. The Select Board is in the process of deliberating whether they should support one or the other or both. And that's what they're trying to figure out. So the citizen petition one will be on the warrant without any question. It will be on there and for a vote at special town meeting. The other one, the Select Board is still trying to figure out politically what makes the most sense. Should they support one or the other? They're essentially the same.
Yeah, I listened to the Select Board's meeting last night. Maybe I missed something, but it wasn't clear to me and we do not know, and no one has put in front of us that there is a Harbor Committee version of this. I do recall one of the Select Board said something about, shouldn't this be our motion, by which I thought they might be adopting or thinking about adopting yours. Okay, thanks. I'm going to throw out a suggestion to the committee that I think that there are two or three important things that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, not the least of which, if they're we haven't been informed, we have not been asked to move or not move on this. But it seems to me if right this minute or tomorrow, there's a conversation with Situate, that might be a good reason for us to defer this to a meeting I think we're gonna have to have a brief meeting next week. And rather than voting while people are talking. That's just a thought. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Does anybody strongly agree, strongly disagree?
Well, what I do agree on is, do you
Well,
need me?
you
anymore?
don't get, Tim, with respect, that's a question for the committee, but I'll
No,
be happy
I'm
to.
gonna leave if you don't need me.
Well, like I said, if you'd like to stick around in case a question comes up while we're
Okay.
talking, we'd be happy to have you.
Okay.
So if somebody has a question for you, and I'll let you run back in. I just want to get to Mary's question first.
Okay.
So Mary?
No, I was just gonna agree with what you said. I think for us to come down in an opinion in any way when there are negotiations going on between the two towns is foolish.
Okay. I'll take that as a strong endorsement of management policy. Does anybody have further observations? With that, then I'm gonna,
I actually have an observation, Rob.
yeah, please.
My observation is I don't know the answer to the legal issue, but I know that there's quite a bit of a legal issue embedded in this article. Whether it's a citizen's petition or a town select board, warrant article. And Situate seems to be gung ho on moving forward with oyster beds in some fashion. They've come back with a second proposal in that location. This is like geared for litigation over that legal issue if we proceed with this warrant article. So I think that part of the discussion has to be that the town is going to be facing a lawsuit if this warrant article passes and is approved by the Attorney General. So regardless of whether 400 citizens sign, the petition the way it was presented to them, I'm sure it wasn't presented to them with the fact that this is going to result in litigation that's going to cost oodles and oodles of dollars at taxpayer expense. That's a factor in my mind, and that's something that I will take into consideration. I don't know the answer to legal issues. They're interesting. There's arguments both ways, I'm sure. I read the settlement filing in connection with the prior litigation. The prior litigation reserved all rights regarding the legal issues. So Situate didn't give up anything, nor did the citizens who fought, or not the organization that filed the lawsuit in the first instance. It was deferred to another day. That other day is going to come if this warrant article passes. So I think everybody should be aware, and we should discuss that significant legal expenses will be expended in connection with this if it passes. That's my only 2 cents.
Thanks. Patrick, did you happen to, just second, Fran, you're next. If the land court entered an order, like actually opined on the question in any way?
My memory is I read the documents that were on the public docket. My memory is there was like a stipulation of dismissal without prejudice that were, specifically had language reserving all rights on both
Interesting.
parties.
Yeah, I'll try and take a look at the docket, just for my own purposes. Fran?
I've had some interest in this thing from the very start. And the interesting thing is the best place for Situate to have an oyster farm is in the North River. And for whatever reason, they're not going there. There's lots of land available there, lots of water available there. It's a good estuary type thing, so it has a good mix of fresh and salt water, and that's really where it belongs. For whatever reason, they're bound and determined to have it inside the glades there. In a good northerly blow or northwesterly blow, I can't imagine what's going to happen. But in the long run, it probably wouldn't do any harm to give them a limited piece of the water to raise some oysters. Actually, oysters are good for the environment. Oysters are good. They clean the ocean. That's what they do, and they also taste good. But for why they're not pursuing the North River, I don't know, and that's not my business, and that's not our business here. Why they keep on insisting that they need to have this massive oyster farm off inside the glades, I don't understand that either. Doesn't make sense. But I do think that sometimes compromise is the better way to solve a problem rather than say flat no, because we're all NIMBYs. I think that they can put some in there that'll have minimal disruption to the sailing community. And incidentally, the eelgrass beds are gone this year. They are gone. We've looked all over the place. It's gone. It's a little bit out on the Shepherd Ledges, but there's something killed them all off again, which is tragic. But anyway, that's my little take on the oyster farms. So,
Thank you, Fran. Mark, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm just gonna largely agree with Patrick and Fran. And just also say that I'm not sure I feel even comfortable significantly weighing in on this issue. I feel it's way beyond our scope or our expertise. I'm glad we have a few lawyers on this committee. I'm obviously in support of all things Cohasset. At the same time, I don't want to blindly walk ourselves into an expensive legal fight just because, you know, for NIMBY's sake, right? As Fran said, whether giving Situate some sort of concession avoids all that, I'm not sure. If it's an all or none thing for them, then I guess we vote to approve this and we look for none versus all. But boy, I feel like this is one of the thornier things this board's ever touched, and I'm not sure what, I mean, I guess jurisdictionally we have the authority to weigh in on this, but I'm not sure we have the expertise, or I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying I have any sort of expertise on this matter.
Meg?
Okay, I have a very stupid question that I feel like I should have asked earlier, and I thought I understood, but now I'm confused. Whether it's the citizen's position or something else that comes to us, the question is, should we put into our bylaws a law that is already on the books? Is that my understanding? I mean, I realize the bylaw is written out more and has more detail to it, but I mean, is that what's being asked here? That there is a 1953 law that says we have some rights and, you know, to oversee and regulate Cohasset Harbor to some extent. And this is just putting into our bylaws more specifics beyond or behind that law. Is that what we're being asked?
But it's a
here?
very specific reading of that law, right?
Well,
Yeah,
that's my question, because when I pull up the actual navigation bylaw that's being proposed, I mean, I haven't read every word, but I don't see anything about oyster farms. I see language pulled from 1953 law. We're all interpreting it
Try and answer
because we know the issue, but
I'll defer to Patrick for the first cut.
thank you. I just don't understand, so I'm just asking.
Go ahead, Patrick.
We do that all the time. So for example, this is something called the State Wetlands Protection Act that governs all development within wetlands areas as defined by the state and buffer zones to those wetlands areas. And we have a Cohasset bylaw that layers on more specifics, and we have a bylaw that more specifically regulates wetlands within Cohasset. So we do that all the time. It's very common for us to layer on to state law and add more specific protections.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I think you're confirming that kind of what I was thinking is what we're doing. I think it feels like we're all probably correctly interpreting that this will be used to be against the oyster farm because that's the political issue that's going on right now. But I just wanted to, this bylaw is not about the oyster farm specifically. It's not saying we can't have oyster farms or we're going to be anti-oyster farm.
But is the Situate Advisory Committee taking their own reading of that bylaw right now and conducting a similar meeting?
They
What
may
we're doing,
be.
saying we read it
They
this
may
way
be.
and we're putting it in our bylaws, and then it's our bylaws versus their bylaws? I don't like.
They very well
That's
may
what I
be.
don't
I just
understand.
wanted to make sure I understood exactly what we're being asked. And when I actually reread the navigation bylaw, I didn't see, and Tim, you probably know it better than any of us, but I didn't see anything that specifically is, you know, against this
It's a-
oyster farm.
My conception of it is that it's like an enabling act. The legislature said, here, you can pass bylaws. You are now enabled to pass bylaws in these areas. And then it says what it says. So where the citizens petition and the other version of it presumably are taking the legislature up on its offer. Now, the town's already passed apparently one set of bylaws, which I'd like to see before voting on this. and I think Tim's argument is that the initial set of bylaws that were adopted because this act permitted them were not coterminous with the authority that was granted. And that this takes the same bylaw and says, you only used 40% of your authority. Now we're going to use the other 60% or most of it. And then you're right,
you.
we have a bylaw in place, which then has applicability to all kinds of uses. It just happens to be that the oyster farm is the use that becomes the problem.
Well, and I guess the point I was just trying to get at was, and I hear the concern about lawsuits. I get it. Practically, I share that concern too, but it just feels like we're being asked to put into the bylaws something that already exists in the law, and
Well, no.
we're all taking it to the or with more specifics. I recognize we're building it out. I totally get that, but we're all taking it to the next level because we know practically how it's going to be used, and I understand that. I'm just a little bit nervous with that being the piece that we're using to make this decision. But anyway, I've said my piece.
Gotcha. Mark, your hand is up again or still up or?
No, up again. So Meg used a key word there, practically. Practically, what does us doing this do? Does it just form the basis of a next step of this process, which is gonna is it eventually bound for litigation anyway, and we got to do this so they can sue us over it? Like, what does us as the advisory committee sitting in our libraries and basements voting on this do today?
Well, we're this connects to your earlier question about, do we have the chops to opine on this? And our job is to opine on everything that goes into a warrant. Because at least as it was explained to me by smart people when I joined, is that we stand in the shoes of the members of town meeting, the voters who attend town meeting. Our job is to try to ask really good versions of the questions that should be asked and may be asked at town meeting, and to advise town meeting that we, as a really interesting cross-sectional committee of the town, it tries to be to get different sorts, to give town meeting an opinion from people who are engaged but amateur, to say we studied this and this is where we're at, which could in fact include a statement that this is really complicated, but this is our take. So that's our job. So what happens if we vote to recommend this? We are recommending to town meeting that it adopt a bylaw which then could be enforced. And I assume that the enforcement mechanism, I think it refers to the harbor master, but it would be at the direction of the town manager / select board to decide what enforcement would be made. And I would assume that the question for litigation wouldn't be ripe until someone went to enforce it. But, this is, don't know what the right analogy is. Handing somebody a loaded gun is clearly not the right analogy, but you're giving someone a tool. You're giving my child a 5-iron in a china shop, and maybe he'll use it for good, but perhaps not. I think that there are sufficient open questions. I'm going to kind of loop back to and even the concerns about whether this is ripe for us to vote on, and what are we voting on, and the fact that there are ongoing discussions, I think, on which we might want to at least get, without perhaps getting into the details of them, which may appropriately not be ready for being publicized, to get to a deal, if a deal is to be done, that maybe we should just defer on this for a week, or conceivably until town meeting. But at least a week, pull together some more information. I know there's some things I want to see. This is a really interesting conversation. Does that work for everybody? Come back, loop back on this, Fran?
Yeah, just another little bit of historical information. Me being the only professional mariner here in this various and sundry people that we have, and a former fisherman in Cohasset, I have a pretty good understanding of what's on top of the water, in the water, and under the water. We used to have pretty good clam fishery in Cohasset. It's gone. We used to have pretty good mussel fishery in Cohasset. It's gone. there used to be a commercial mussel fishery on the North River. It's gone. But we have had, as Tim mentioned earlier, a great infestation of Asian green crabs. And they have eaten almost all of the clams and all of the mussels. They've just done it. They've just destroyed everything. So will they eat up the oysters? I don't know the answer to that question. But
That could be a
certainly-
self-correcting problem.
Yeah. So it's certainly in a state of flux as far as aquaculture goes. But further with the legal ramifications that have been exercised here tonight and the ongoing discussions between Situate and Cohasset, I think more work's got to be done. I mean, I appreciate what Tim and your group has been doing, Tim. I appreciate you all the time and effort you put in, but I don't think you got all the answers yet.
I saw Jean and then I saw Meg.
I think Meg was first.
I see Meg and then I see Jean.
Mine is purely an administrative question. Rob, I think you had mentioned that there is a bylaw that exists right now that speaks to this 1953 law. And so this is not the first, this is updating that, I believe you said.
Well, no, I don't think so. I don't think it
Oh.
updates it. Tim said, and I believe
Okay.
this to be true, that after the 1953 legislative special, well, it's not a special act was passed, the town of Cohasset adopted a bylaw, which Tim described and Fran had some insights into.
Okay. I would just be curious if we could see that bylaw. I'm
That's,
curious. Yeah, I'm curious what is different. What is the change, and if it relates to anything practically that might go beyond the oyster farm, for better or for worse.
I agree. Jean?
And I'd also like to see what the legal ramifications are, maybe get an opinion. As you said, we're dealing with a smoking gun here. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't. Like, if we say, yeah, let's go gung ho, and then town meeting says, let's go gung ho, then we leave ourselves open to being sued.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a bylaw in place that covers this. Why do we have to mess with it unless we have to make the language stronger? I don't know. I think we're opening ourselves up for legal problems without more information.
Let me see if the committee has anything else, Tim, and then I'm happy to hear from you. Okay, Tim, and then obviously if anyone else has any questions or comments. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, I'll comment on a couple of things. First of all, in Fran's comment, and I apologize, I'm wearing a couple of hats here, but Friends of Basking Beach has funded a study of all of the shellfish off of Basking Beach, and we have found that there are today indigenous shellfish of about 6 different varieties. When the eelgrass beds were there, it also was the habitat of small flounders and other aquatic creatures that were there for protection. That eelgrass bed is gone, but the shellfish still exists. Another bylaw that will be on the warrant is a shellfish / aquaculture bylaw for the town of Cohasset to issue recreational and commercial permits for shellfishing. The reason that all of the Cohasset waters have been closed for many years is, number one, we did not have an active shellfish constable. We now have that in Josh Kimball, who is an active shellfish constable, also a natural resource police officer of Cohasset. And number two, we needed a bylaw that allowed permits to be issued for both recreational and commercial shellfishing. Those will be on the warrant for the special town meeting. So that will open up all of the Cohasset waters for commercial and recreational shellfishing. The area for shellfish.
Tim, can I ask, what article is this local shellfish bylaw? I don't,
Well,
that isn't Article 10.
The warrant hasn't been approved yet, Rob, but it will be on there. My understanding, it will be on there. It's been submitted, it's been passed by the Cohasset Harbor Committee, and it will be on there.
It's
So
news
they-
to us.
Okay,
The
well,
warrant goes to press,
all
goes to
right,
press.
you know,
fairly
I
soon.
can't speak for the the select board, but it's been submitted. It was submitted more than, probably a couple months ago. So it should be in the process, but there is a shellfish bylaw to be on the warrant. If it's not there, I will follow up and try and find out where it is. But those are the two things that have prohibited shellfishing in Cohasset. But to answer Fran's question is there are shellfish off of Bassing's Beach.
Okay. Well, because we have some other things to cover and we've given this a fair amount of time, unless anybody has anything, crucial, I'd like to cut off debate. Fran?
Just one more thing. The last time I went clamming in Bassin Beach, I had to buy a $50 Situate clam license. So, I mean, if we control that, then why do we have to buy a Situate clam license? Comment, no, nothing required to say that, but obviously we don't control it.
Yeah, so like I said, I think, and even in Tim's last comments there, it just opens up yet another document that we ought to look at. I'm gonna ask the staff to pull together some things, and I suggest that we defer this question to our next meeting. I'm not sure that requires a motion and a vote. But does anybody have an opinion about that?
Nope.
Can I get sort of a sense of the meeting, set of thumbs or something for deferring it? Okay, all the thumbs I see are upward. Tim, thanks, and thanks for sort of bearing with us. Like I said, when I got hired for this job, the town moderator said our job is to ask hard questions, and hard questions don't necessarily indicate predispositions. They always do with the judges in front of, but not with us. So
I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate what you all do. I mean, it's important to do it. There's plenty of information that has not been discussed tonight, but certainly if you have any further information or questions, please let me know. Happy to address them.
thanks very much. I think we may
You bet.
very well take.
Okay, with that, I'm going to sign off. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so that was Article 15. We're gonna punt. There's a pun buried in there someplace. We're gonna punt on that. Just in terms of being orderly, I suggest we go back and just go through them in numerical order. So you turn your attention
Bob,
to.
just a point of order.
Yeah, sure, Patrick.
Not a point of order about this meeting, but I saw Michelle was on the meeting. I don't see Chris on the meeting, but what is the status of this warrant that was circulated to us?
I'm actually here.
Chris
I'm
just
wondering that-
Chris
we're
just
hearing
joined us.
There's possibly a navigation bylaw by the town that I don't see there. And then also this other aquaculture warrant article that I don't see there.
Chris.
So let me take. I'm actually in a moving car, so I'm not have my screen on. The council has determined that in 1942, the town meeting did already authorize shellfishing regulations, and we don't have to put it back on the warrant. So I just got that from council the other day. She cited me the act. It's not on the warrant because it doesn't seem that it has to be any longer. That's empowering the select board to adopt shellfishing regulations. So that's the status of that.
That's what I've been saying all along.
In terms of this, the select board the warrant is as it is. There's 13 articles and there's 13 articles on there by the select board and 2 citizens petitions. I'm not anticipating, as of right now, any changes to that in the next week. Does that
Okay.
answer your questions?
Patrick, is that I think that clears up the mystery about the shellfish article, it's not coming. Although now I'm interested to see the 1942 bylaw, but
No,
I'm
it wasn't,
gonna-
it wasn't a bylaw, Rob. It was a, like a local, like a home, like adoption of a state ordinance that empowers. I don't know if
Okay.
if there are shellfish regulations, they've been lost to time. So the select board's gonna have to adopt new ones anyway to meet modern standards.
Oh, I see. So the town is empowered to do so, but there's no record that it has.
Yeah,
But
Yes, I mean, it may
Okay.
have, but I don't, we can't find it.
Oh, boy.
all right. Well, if it's all right with you, shall we paste Fran?
You know, here we go again. Here's the old guy. I've dug clams here since I was 7 years old. And we used to get a clam license. And on the clam license, there were all the rules and regulations. They always had them. And people kept saying, oh, no, we didn't. Well, we did. So lo and behold, they dug them out.
Do you have one sitting around, Fran?
I don't. I have my own lobster fishing license, but I don't have my own clam license.
From 70-something years ago. All right, shall we pay some bills? Turning your attention to Article 2 in the draft warrant. There are a series of bills unpaid from prior years. It requires town meeting approval. Chris has mentioned earlier that these were, they're unpaid bills. They're services and goods that we consumed, and shall we pay for them? Chris, is there anything to add? Or perhaps the more efficient thing to do would be, does anybody have any questions, or are you okay with just voting on this?
The one thing I will say is that these are subject to potential edit. I think this is the universe. That said, we might, if we do anything, we hope to tweak them down a little bit. So it's possible we might find ways of addressing them. Some of them.
I'm certainly willing to vote on a number if there's a potential for a downward departure. Does anybody have any questions? Then perhaps a motion in the form of, does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 2 in the form it appears in the October 25, 2022 warrant? Motion, anybody?
So moved.
Jean, a second.
Second,
Mary, roll call vote. Gina Stino.
Aye.
Well, I should say, is there any, there should be the opportunity for additional comment, but I don't think there is any. So, good. Okay, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi.
Aye.
Ellen Mar.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I am an aye as well. Article 4, we have voted item 8. We are left with item number 9. My understanding is that this had been a $300 and something thousand item for what's what I'm looking for here? $300,000 item relating to implementation studies relating to the field study document that is out and about. I listened to portions of the select board meeting last night. That's part of the services package you get with me being chair. And it was discussed to scale that ask back to a much more limited approach to dealing with the inadequacies of the building at Milliken Field. So I'll ask Chris to weigh in on this. But before we do that, Mike Dick has been in the audience. I'm going to ask him if he's on capital budget. If he's just observing, he's welcome to observe, but I think out of inter-committee committee. I'm gonna promote him and see if he is interested in this is a capital-ish expenditure, or if he's just watching. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Good. We'll ask Mike to promote. There we are. And like that. Oh, we get a chart. So perhaps Mike has
Now, here I am.
there he is. Good evening,
I'm-
Mike. I saw
Good
you sort of in
evening.
the outer darkness, and I just without prolonging our meeting, I was wondering if there was anything that you wanted to weigh in on, or if you were just watching.
I actually am observing as the liaison to advisory.
Very
So
good.
Mike Barclay and I partner on many issues and we talk a lot, and he often joins our meetings. Capital budget is going to meet tomorrow night, and we'll take up some of the spending articles you're discussing now. And I really find it so helpful to hear everyone's opinions. And it helps me certainly, evaluate the questions in front of us. So you'll see me. I'm just sort of hanging out and listening and
All right. Well, you're welcome. You know, I'll just leave you promoted. You can be kind of a substitute, stunt Mike, who's not able to
Okay.
join us this evening. And if there is anything relating to capital items that you want to, weigh in on, please feel free.
thank you.
Sure. And so let's, Chris, if you could address the changes. I remember we had a brief conversation this in our last meeting, and there was a pretty substantial, I don't want to say dissatisfaction, but there are a lot of questions about what that article is all about. And I understand that the select board has very substantially changed what it's looking to do. So if you can walk us through it.
Sure. I think Michelle can correct me if I'm misstating anything. So the conversations about Milliken Field are going to continue. That said, there'll be no ask for additional funds for any project for that particular discussion yet. Instead, rather, the conversation will continue into this, hopefully into the winter and spring. There were two modifications to this particular article. Oh, I can't. I'm like regular me tonight, Michelle. Can you make me like co-host me?
There you go.
The 100. So the 322,000 is gone. What's in its place is 130,000 for the field project that's been talked about forever, which is putting bathrooms, concession stand, and storage there. That project has been so snake bitten. It's been all over the place. Didn't make a lot of progress early on. Michelle's tried almost literally everything, including trying to get temporary bathrooms there, but we can't even get those. So there's an alternative with a local contractor that she's trying to pull together that would involve construction of something that's basically along the lines that we've talked about, which is some public bathrooms and some storage and a concession area in the general spot where the current building is, or right next to it. It looks like with the money that's already in the kitty, about $180,000, Michelle, I think, right? Something like that.
There's 137 in the kitty right now.
So 137. So if we add another 130, we're about 260, 270. That should get us to the building we want to build. So that's the new ask, and I'll show you what this looks like.
So Chris, just one thing to add. Within that ask, there's also additional funding to continue studying field options at Milliken.
So it's 130 total though, right? That's what I have.
I have 135, but if you have 130, we're splitting hairs, but I just want to make sure people are aware it's to keep the study going and to improve the concession stand / bathrooms.
Okay, with that caveat that Michelle's added. Again, I had written my notes at 130, Michelle, but if it's
Okay.
but I can make it 135. It doesn't matter to me. I don't want to cheap us out. and if for some reason I can't share my screen right now. Oh, there it is. So this is what that's what it looks like.
Okay, Mary, I see your hand.
Yeah, so a couple things. So, so this 130 or 135 is going to be married with $130,000 that's also sitting waiting. So we're talking about $260,000, part of which will be used to build this building with bathroom facilities, concessions, and the rest to continue the field study. So we're obviously looking at an estimate here. This isn't, we don't have plans or anything like that yet.
We do have an older plan that we've resurrected to try to complete this project as inexpensively as we can, using our contractors that are currently under contract, as well as a local contractor. We're using the existing building that's there. The existing shed that's there that has this concession stand, we are going to be re-outfitting that to be bathrooms and a concession stand, and adding a larger shed to where the baseball shed is and sharing with baseball space. So that's how we're able to skin this one.
I would just, this is just me personally, be interested in seeing the continuation of the field study and this renovation or build out of an existing building separated rather than being lumped together. I think it's it will be an easier story. People will understand it a little bit better when they get their warrant. So that would just be a personal preference of mine.
Ellen?
I was just gonna say the same thing as Mary. I think it's very confusing to have two different projects in the same line item. And because they're two very different things. So I would advocate also to see what portion of the 130 is for the continuation of the field study. And then when, Michelle, do you think you'll have an idea of what the build out? That's pretty expensive. I'm sure it's going rates, but it seems expensive to build a shed.
So we're not building.
Well,
So we're not,
adding on and retrofitting, you know, and
we're not adding on. So we're using the existing shed. We're gutting the existing shed and we're adding the 2 restrooms and a concession area.
okay.
So there's no additional build out in the area. The only additional room that will be added is for utilities, and that is so small that it will just be attached to the side of the building.
All right, thank you.
Is there any particular reason that, I mean, they're not building something larger? I mean, that field gets a ton of use. It's a, you know, the jewel in the crown of our public recreational holdings. Why are we just kitting out an old shed?
To be honest, it's all about funding. So we originally had a pot from CPC in 2017 of $188,000. They then added $25,000 to that pot so we could build something. We've bid it as stick build, we've bid it as modular, we've bid it as a container to be outfitted. It doesn't matter how we bid it based on the public procurement laws, it comes in at over $500,000.
Wow. I'd be happy to lease you my garage. It's only half a block away. Okay, that's a good explanation. It's affordable. So what I'm hearing is that maybe we should defer, since we've deferred another question, we defer this until we can see a breakout number between the project, which is pretty self-explanatory, but how much of the total number goes to the field study and for what? So shall we, I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest that we defer Article 4, Item 9, and that should come back for a pretty modest conversation. Everybody okay with that?
Agree.
Yeah, that seems obvious. Okay, so that is We've approved Article 4, item 8. We're deferring on 9, so we're not quite done with that one yet. Moving on to Article 6. Ellen, can you remind me from your minutes? We had not voted 6, did we?
No.
Chris?
CPC hasn't finalized this yet, so there's really nothing, there's not a final warrant article to put in front of you. They're not
Oh,
meeting-
those are still tentative
Yeah,
numbers?
yeah,
Okay.
they're still debating, so they're looking to meet next week. Hopefully Tuesday. If they do, then they'll come in front of you Wednesday, potentially.
Okay, so Article 6 will defer as well, yes? Hearing no opposition, which brings us to. Did I skip something here?
Good.
Yeah, I skipped Article 5. So we had voted to approve items 1, 2, 4, and 5. My understanding is that item number 3 is off until annual. Is that correct, Chris?
No, it was just being reduced to a study or design plans as opposed to the full build out.
I
So
see.
instead of 200,000, it was 20,000, though I think that's still is that not set until tomorrow night either, Michelle? Okay.
So we're getting our final proposals back. They're coming in around $50,000 opposed to the
Okay.
20.
I should ask, since we have Mike with us, Mike, I understand that capital budget is approved items 1, 2, 4, and 5. Are you guys continuing to discuss 3, 6, and 7?
Yes. Without consulting my notes, yes, we still have some unfinished business.
Okay, I mean, typically the order of operations is capital budget makes a recommendation, we make a recommendation, and then our friends on the select board slavishly adopt our recommendations. Well, not really, but they should. So that's 5. We'll defer on 5 as well. And that brings us to, I understand, Article 10, the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Chris, what's this? Now it's showing a Concom recommendation by a vote of 5-0, but between Chris first and then maybe Patrick, if you could just let us in on the status of this.
I'll defer to Patrick's conversation. He's going to be more of a subject matter expert on this than I.
I'm actually about to run out of battery, but I was not able to connect with Chris McFarland, so I don't really have a substantive update to provide. I would suggest we defer, since we're going to have a meeting on November 2nd, I suggest that we defer this to November 2nd.
Okay, done. I'll be interested to hear from Chris as well. So, which leaves us with Article 14. 14 is it sets itself up as a citizen's petition regarding sidewalks. I had made a somewhat facile recommendation that perhaps we treat this like a sense of the meeting and we don't really weigh in. My recollection is that Patrick raised a good counterpoint to that, which was maybe we're not doing our job. And there's an argument, not Patrick's necessarily, but there is an argument that it's not the business of town meeting to be providing generalized statements of support for things. It's the purpose of town meeting is to vote on articles that have sort of a point. So this gets back to Mark's, fundamental question, this fundamental ontological question of what is it that we're here to do? So those are the issues such as they are. Does anybody have some views on what we should do about this? The substance, anything else? Mary?
I'm just curious, did the select board discuss this last evening? I wasn't able to watch that.
Chris,
No,
I did, but I
no.
don't have.
They did not.
Didn't they appoint some sort of sidewalks committee though, or charge it or something?
Yeah, they adopted a
a charge for a sidewalk committee, a broader concept sidewalk committee.
Okay. Ellen, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to comment back, to what we discussed last week about citizen petition and also regarding the navigation bylaw. It seems, and I was trying to quickly flip through the last couple of years of town warrants that I had. They seem to be very special interest and not for the greater good of the whole of the town. And I'm just betwixt and between on whether we weigh in on citizens' petitions or not, because they are specialized to specific groups. And although 400 people on a petition for the navigation bylaw sounds impressive, it's 400 out of 8,300. It's not an overwhelming majority. And I'm just uncertain myself of how to handle a citizen's petition.
If I could respond to that, my understanding from our charge, our job, and the basis for our enormous annual paychecks is to advise town meeting on all matters on the warrant, particularly fiscal ones, but all matters on the warrant, and anything on the warrant is going to have some effect on the money. We can choose to not recommend, to recommend not, or to simply say that we have no recommendation to, I suppose, abstain. I mean, that if the majority of the committee chooses to do so, that is a position we can take. But we will consider and vote on everything, including citizens petitions. For example, we had a citizens petition 1 or 2 meetings ago having to do with limitations on use of free cash. It was a citizens petition, and we considered it. The proponent came in, a former member of our committee, came in and stated the position, and we took a position. In fact, we took a position not to recommend. The one that's odd was the ball field lights discussion, because that turned into a sense of the meeting petition. And there had been a long time. I remember them in town meetings, sense of the meeting questions, but it'd been a long years and years and years. I can be wrong, but I attend pretty much all of them, and I just don't remember them. And we decided, well, who are we to tell the meeting what the sense of its own meeting is? But I don't think that that's the right answer. It's either opine on the petition itself, and you're right, they're also often very local interests, but they're asking the town to basically create law of a sort. And either we say, yeah, we think that's a good idea, or no, we don't think it's a good idea. Or I'm coming around to the idea that we say, we don't think these things are good. We're not going to recommend the town meeting take sense of the meeting votes. Give us a petition, tell us we want to spend $10 million to rebuild King Street, and then we'll give you an opinion back, or 2 million, 1 million, or whatever it is. But if you're not going to ask us for that, we're not going to recommend your article. Those are our options as I see them, and I'm talking to them. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, Alan. You might not agree with it, which is fine, but I think our job is we've got to take a vote or make a decision among ourselves not to. And we've got this thing in front of us. So what do we do? Anybody want to make a motion? I could make a motion, and then it can die for a lack of a second. Why don't I give it why don't I take a shot at it and see what anybody thinks? That I'll take the negative, that the advisory committee does not recommend the town meeting adopt Article 14. And if we're asked to explain ourselves, the explanation I would give, if it was approved by the committee, would be that the advisory committee thinks the town meeting is to make decisions on specific articles, not aspirational articles, and go from there. So I've moved it. If anybody's to second it,
Second.
where it can die a lonely death. All right, thank you, Fran.
Yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded. It's open for discussion by the,
So point of discussion,
yeah, please.
are we setting sort of a precedent here that we're gonna do this, we're gonna punt on all of these things?
Nothing's ever binding. I mean, we can't bind ourselves and we can't bind future versions of ourselves. But we are, if we choose to do so, making a statement that if you have an idea and you want to come forward with it, then come forward with something specific. They want, this petition says appropriate funds for a feasibility study and plan. Okay, how much? What happens when this gets approved? Is it an unlimited amount of money to do a feasibility study and plan? What does that mean exactly? Just, and nobody from the set of proponents to this article have asked to come talk to us. That's the other thing that I have, and this is.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want us to approve something, come talk to us. Tim was here, and so I have Meg and then Fran.
I want to clarify something. So this is asking the town to appropriate funds, but this would, let's assume this gets voted yes at town meeting. The town would still have to, this would still go to the select board and be voted on, correct? To the actual funding request. This, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Procedurally what happens? Okay. So I'm going to take the alternative approach, mostly just, I don't know, I feel like being contrary, I suppose, that, I worry that by voting against this, we're sending the message that we don't support this project. I recognize that's not what we're saying, but that may get lost in the details. And I like the idea of citizens petitions. I think they get people in our town engaged. I think they get people to learn about the process and participate and share their voices. And I think that should be encouraged. And given that this is not, if this gets voted in, it's not automatically going to get funded. It still has to go through that process. I would vote to support it so that it can have its vote on the floor of town meeting without the sort of concern of folks who say, well, why did advisory vote against it? Do they not support this project? Should I be against this? And I don't know, I like to see citizens petitions. I think I appreciate that it's people getting engaged. And I'm not sure we should knock them for not coming in front of us because I don't know how many people really understand this process. Now, some of those names on that list, I know probably do, but I don't feel like that's a judgment we should make without them having the opportunity to speak for themselves in response to that accusation.
It's an accusation. Fran, go ahead.
Sorry, that was a harsh word. That's a harsh word.
Jack Hughes.
I think you summarized it very, very well. And keep in mind, everybody, that normally when these astute decisions are rendered to the various and sundry at the meeting, one of us gets up and explains why we acted the way we did. And the explanation would be, you people have come up with a wonderful idea to make sidewalks all over the place, but you haven't talked to anybody about it. You haven't been to the committee, so would be part of this, could support you. You got no money, so we can't just give you an open-ended checkbook and say fill in the dots in for whatever you want. So there are ways to do these things, and as Meg just pointed out, some of these people aren't too swift on how to do this stuff, but a lot of them are. And this is a matter of put the time in, talk to the right people, get the right information, and then come with us with an article that go before the town meeting. Simple as that. But I think, Rob, your summary was just perfect. You got it. So.
Well, to Meg's point, first off, I can't be happier that we're finally disagreeing about something. This is great. Thank you. I think that I would be inclined to make clear to town meeting that the advisory committee does not oppose sidewalks on King Street necessarily. We just think that town meeting needs to be asked something more specific. It's a process thing, and that citizens petitions are fine. There's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that we should punt on all of them or deny them all or anything else, or hold them to a higher standard. But, if the selectmen came to us with this petition, we would send it back. Meg, I see your hand up. I want to ask a question to Mike about how it is that capital budget would deal with something like this briefly, but Meg had her hand up.
And mine's
first.
just a procedural question, so yeah, come back. to
Sure,
me.
go ahead.
Oh,
Go
well, no,
ahead.
I wasn't trying to, but I guess I
No.
just procedurally to Fran's point. So is there any reason why this group of people wouldn't have brought a more specific citizens petition article to say, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand, is there a reason why it would have been framed this way to then sort of need to go through a further process of a specific budget funding request versus just coming straight to the warrant with, please approve $50,000 for this study? I mean, I don't understand the procedure well enough. Chris, yeah. Sorry.
I jump in with a quick follow-up.
Fran and then Chris.
All right,
and
just
then
to be
perhaps
quick with
Mike.
it, back in 1972, when we moved in here to South Main Street, there was an old decrepit sidewalk out here. It's almost invisible. It had never been maintained for years and years. And I went to the town. I went to the DPW or selectmen, and I said, we need to have the sidewalk redone here on South Main Street. And we got all the information, got how much it's going to cost, and guess what? It got done. But that's, and remember the old foreman of the highway department says, "Oh, nobody will walk on that sidewalk." But they do, and they still do.
I see Jean's hand, so I'll go there first, but then Chris and Mike. Go ahead.
We could also, instead of using the harsher term not recommend, we could also take no action. And when we get to town meeting, get up and explain that we're not taking action because it's not specific enough for us to do that. There's no detail here. There's no information about how much it's going to cost. But, it could be $100,000 for a sidewalk study. And as I recall, it took quite some time to get the sidewalks on Forest
Sure.
Ave. So we do have some history in doing this and putting sidewalks in where people desperately wanted them.
Yeah.
And I also note that there are only 2 people on this list who would be directly impacted by the sidewalks. It seems kind of
I
random.
agree with you, Gene, which is why I agree with you, but I get to a different conclusion. I agree with you, which is why I think we should choose to not recommend, because we should say, if you want this to work, do it in a more concrete fashion in the future. By taking no action, we're saying there's no problem with what they've done. We're just kind of agnostic. By choosing to not recommend, we're not judging the merits of the proposal. We're judging in terms of how it was proposed, I feel like.
Can I ask Chris a question? I know there's some hands, and if you could hold those thoughts for just a second. Chris, this article gets passed. Appropriate funds for a feasibility study and plan. What is the directive to town government, the Board of Selectmen and you as town manager? What do you do next?
So let me just clarify. So the petitioners were given access to town council. I took part in the sessions.
I was going to say.
And I was a little surprised that they put the funding in there. It was discussed, but when I spoke with one of the petitioners after the fact, they said this is just a sense of the meeting article, right? They weren't actually looking for any specific funding. They were just looking to raise the profile of the issue so that it would get, noticed and attention being paid. So we still have to clarify that in emotion, right? So it's clear to the meeting what the action will be. The select board is already, we've already been working with the select board and others to address safety concerns on the street. We're looking, the select board authorized us to put some of those flashing speed, those speed limit signs that flash, tell you you're going too fast. We're looking to install at least one of them on that street and some other potential safety signage as an effort to improve the safety on the street and slow traffic down. So this was part of this. The residents, at least, again, I'm not speaking for them. I'm just speaking from my perception of what they were saying. They wanted to raise that profile further. They wanted to say, hey, we need the town to pay attention to this neighborhood. It's really important that we do something here. And sidewalks obviously are a very concrete step to that. That said, they also appreciate that we're not sure what it would, how much it would cost, or even what a study would cost, quite frankly, because it's a long stretch of road. And I think you have all of Cohasset's little specialties in there. There's wetlands, there's water, there's public water supply, there's ledge. So, and there's a lot of people who put stuff into the right of way, trees, fences, retaining walls. So we don't really know what it would cost and what's actually, and what's feasible. So the impression is that, again, they want to get this on the radar screen.
So I had Mary's hand and then Meg.
So I think my sense, and it might be incorrect, that this part of the reason this issue has come to the forefront is because of all the work on 3A and the detours over the last many months. And I've certainly sympathize. I've heard some of those residents in different forums, and it had to be concerning what was going on. That said, if there would be some way for us to, and maybe it is just to not recommend, but in our remarks during town meetings say, if this is something that is important to you and urgent, then perhaps come back at Springtown meeting with XYZ, a little bit more of a clear direction for us to go. Town meeting in person is a wonderful forum, but I don't personally know that it's a place for a marketing campaign to raise awareness of an issue. I don't know that that's my take on what we're there for.
Meg.
I think that, and thank you, Chris, for answering that question. I think that since it seems like this is a sense of the meeting article, then I think we shouldn't take a position on it. And I worry that taking a position negatively or positively is potentially butting into something that, I mean, to your point, Rob, our job is to look into these issues and do the due diligence. This isn't one of those questions that requires that at this point. We're not being asked to spend a specific amount of money. It's not a direct request. It's a sense of the meeting petition and or article, and therefore I think we should stay out of it.
Mike, I did want to ask you very quickly. I mean, this doesn't really fall right into capital budget, but it's capital budget adjacent. Would you guys deal with this? Would this come your way? Would you provide a recommendation on this? I don't think you'd even be asked, would you?
Correct. I'm following exactly what your reaction was, Rob, in that we don't have a concrete proposal for a spend. And without that concrete proposal for a spend, and without a request, a formal request, and our request form has specifics that we're looking for in terms of what the money's going to be spent on and how the project will proceed, we would not take it up, I don't think. I think our chair would take a very dim view of it, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't think
Chris.
it's on our agenda for tomorrow night. I'm actually checking right now. I don't think it's there.
Chris, and just to Meg's point particularly, if this got passed in exactly verbatim, and it said, to appropriate and fund certain things, is there any concern that that would create an enforceable obligation by the town to do those things come what may? Or I guess you couldn't because there's no money appropriated.
Right, yeah. So
There's no appropriation.
As I understand it, you can't ask town meeting for a wish, right? Amount. If you want funding, you got to say, I want this bunch of money that's coming from here, right? That's how it works. So there would have to be an amendment or something. If the purpose of this was to actually fund a study, they have to say we want this much money, and it has to come from here. Right? And that hasn't happened. And again, that's when I asked the petitioners. They said, "Oh no, we're just looking for affirmation, right?" And that's my word, not theirs, right? Now, if we are going to work with them on getting a motion together, so that and if that changes, then I'll let you know. That said, they understand the realities that at least what was explained was you really, I don't know what it would cost to study this. I mean, we don't know, and there's a process for that kind of stuff. Right, as Mike pointed out, right? If we're going to do that kind of stuff, we got to go through the process and ask and explain and fund it and put it in the priority list of where it would go. And doing it another way, we're kind of without a dollar. To go back to your point, without a dollar figure, we really can't do anything with it because it's not real. It's just
Yeah, the
it's
magic
not a
word is
concrete ask.
appropriated
Let me
funds.
rephrase that. It's real. It's just not a concrete ask.
Yeah.
It's not an action. It's not an actionable ask.
Okay, so here's where we're at. Unfamiliar territory, because we pretty much have operated by consensus for about the last, while, which is good. I mean, there should be disagreement, and I don't think it's, I think it's polite disagreement, so it's good. We have some options. There's a motion that's been seconded. We can have a vote on that. If we have a vote on that and there are votes in opposition, at town meeting, when we give a presentation to town meeting of the advisory committee's votes, the advisory committee voted 5-4 to do X. The person who's presenting it would present both the pro and the con in language agreed by people who supported both concerns. So if it was against and there's a concern that the advisory, that we shouldn't squelch, and I don't, pardon me if I'm kind of misconceiving it a little bit, but, dampen citizen petitions or not permit a forum for bringing these important questions to town meeting, that will be said to town meeting. When we have a disagreement, both sides get explained and any member can speak individually to it. So that's one way to proceed. Another way to proceed, if somebody wanted to amend the motion to either defer our recommendation to town meeting to see if there is a motion that clarifies some of these problems, we could consider whether to amend in that direction, or I think at this point we'd have to take a vote to defer action. And so that's kind of the extent of how I can parse the rules of procedure for these things. Does anybody have any suggestions? Is there a motion to amend? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote on the main motion. God, I feel like Dan Evans. So the motion's been made and seconded to not recommend adoption by town meeting. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins, there's a thumb up.
Aye,
And the
yeah.
tick does an aye. Thank you. Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
I
Meg Wheeler.
I am very happy to be the sole dissenter.
Good for you.
I will stand alone. I'm an A.
And Rob Hillman of an aye as well. Okay, well, I think in addition to getting a lot of work done, I think we had a really interesting conversation about why it is we do this, and I appreciated the opportunity to engage in that. I don't want to keep anybody any later. Can we defer committee reports unless Mary and Ellen, I know you guys had a meeting of yours, and Jean had a meeting of your subcommittee. Chris? I'm sorry, Chris.
Michelle and I have one short update for you on your not within 48 hours, if you're okay with that.
Sure, I'm not there yet, but
Okay, all right,
don't let me
all right.
blow past it. One of the agenda items was subcommittee reports, and I just wanted to know if there's anything from our school budget subcommittee, which had a noticed meeting today, wasn't it?
Yep, so we,
Yeah.
very brief, we met at 6 o'clock. It was great. We basically talked about what our objectives were. And it essentially is to aid and assist and clarify wherever needed with the school budget. So anything I'm misstating there?
Nope.
Okay. There you go.
Outstanding. And I saw that you'd had some correspondence and the school committee is providing you, your subcommittee with information. which
Yeah,
is
and it's all, it found its way on the website, so that's good.
excellent. Any other liaison issues? We're obviously going to have to follow up with Chris McFarland and Concom. Okay, so then that brings us to the agenda item for. Make sure I don't skip anything as I often do. On articles, liaison assignments, approval of minutes. I circulated a set of minutes that were prepared by Ellen relating to our October 19, 2022 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes in the form she submitted them, and then we can take corrections or amendments, if any?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Was that Mike? Mark, thank you.
Close enough.
I didn't call you Catherine, which is the name that's up on the screen, so
It's because I'm back on my iPad, no longer using government resources.
outstanding. So did anybody, I reviewed them, Ellen, thank you, they're incredibly thorough. If does anybody have any comments, corrections, amendments, etc.? Hearing none, we'll vote to approve. Roll call vote, Gina Stino.
I was not present at the meeting.
Okay, Fran Collins.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy.
Aye, very good minutes.
Mark Maggi.
Aye.
Ellen Mar.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
It's actually just realizing I don't think I know which date we're doing, but if I was present, I vote aye. If I can vote, it's a yes.
Excellent. And Rob Hillman is also an aye. So they are approved and endorsed by the prior secretary of the committee. So that's good. That brings us to topics not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours. Chris, apparently we have one. What do you got?
So the Clean Harbor came in to take a look at the elevator today. I think Michelle has the final update on that and where I think we would like to go next.
So Clean Harbors was on site today. They started with the oil mitigation. It appears from what they were able to assess today that it hasn't seeped any further into the grounds, which was great news for us.
Awesome.
So now the next step is, do we want to replace the jack and the elevator, which would come at the cost at about $35,000 to $38,000. And if so, do we want this to be go before capital tomorrow night? And how do we want to handle this?
I think probably an orderly way to do this would be I'll defer to Mike, obviously, but if capital can get it tomorrow night, we're having a meeting next week, so we can tee it up with appropriate notice and all that.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Chris?
Yeah, Mike, does that make sense? I mean, I really, obviously this is a late start of it. We just got word on this today that it's actually feasible, so.
Yeah, it certainly would fall on our agenda the same way it did here tonight, you know, not anticipated within 48 hours. We need to get in touch with Brian Host and make sure that he knows that this is coming and that we really want to have as much detail as possible on what the bid or the request for services will look like. The other thing I want to stress here, and it goes to one of Rob's earlier points, we try to meet on Monday nights so that we are ahead of advisory and we can forward on. This week got all kaflooey. So tomorrow, Thursday, would be the last day we could post for a Monday meeting for advisory. So I think here too, we need to have a conversation with Brian tomorrow morning to say, you know, can we get capital budget, me and Brian, to get this going. One other item is that at this point, there really effectively is only 3 of us who are regularly attending our meetings. So on the one hand, it's easy enough to get us there, but we are missing a couple people. That's a long answer, so I'll shut up. But thanks.
I just think we want to, the elevator's been in service for a while. It's starting to become more and more of a problem. We've had residents who are exceptionally unhappy, and some who have tried to, despite physical infirmities, push themselves up and down stairs in a way that's not healthy. Even though we're providing we're meeting the requirements of the ADA by providing alternative services on the first floor. That said, it's not a perfect scenario by any means, and it also makes it difficult to move stuff up and down. I mean, we have heavy things go up and down. So the news from today makes it feasible to get the elevator back in operation sooner rather than later. It was since we've already stuck, thankfully, to the advisory committee for releasing the funds. We've already done all the other work. It's really a process question. So since town meeting is here, we'll run it through the regular committee process. If that for some reason doesn't work, we can always come back to the advisory committee to seek money from the reserve fund. I would rather not do that if there's an alternative, because the reserve fund is our emergency money for emergencies, right? When the elevator first broke, that was an emergency, right? That's the reason where we wanted to socialize this tonight, just to get that process going, even though it's kind of late.
Okay, well, I think it's good that it's on everybody's radar. I'll try and make sure that it's on our agenda appropriately. Is there anything else in topics? Oh, I'm sorry, I see hands. Fran first, then Ellen.
Chris, how far along are we with the town hall proposal, the new town hall? And does this elevator fit into the new plan? Do you know that question?
So I think I'll defer to Michelle. I think the answer is that it does not fit into the new town hall. That said, we're, and the progress on that continues. We'll have Michelle answer that.
Yep. So the progress on the new town hall is progressing. Actually, they're meeting tomorrow night. They're working towards 100% design. They're working to procure the CM, and they're looking to actually have bids in hand to present at annual town meeting in the spring.
Good.
Unfortunately, this elevator is not part of the plan. They would need an entirely new elevator.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I hate to spend that kind of money. This is just to have it for, a year or two, and then it's gone again. However, we got to get people in and out of the building. I know Chris has made every accommodation that you could to get people on the first floor, but what about one of these Acorn stair lifts? Have anybody looked at something like that? They're pretty slow, but they do move people.
So I think we did ask our building inspector about that, and because our staircase is not wide enough to accommodate that, it may become a hazard, I think was the answer.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Ellen?
I was just, if we just talked about this going, before capital, which is great, but I just did some quick math on the free cash, adding 50,000 more to collective bargaining and cutting Milliken field study from 332 to 130 still leaves about 152,000. I don't know what your total pot of free cash is, but that's another alternative, since this is a one-time expenditure, 35 to 38,000, right?
Yeah, that is underscoring why we're having this conversation, because if we have the ability to tap free cash to pay for this, it's better than tapping the reserve fund if we have to. So that's the reason we want to have that conversation now. And
So
yes,
we would
reduce with there's potentially money available.
So we'd be asked to vote to apply just another line item to the capital from free cash to pay for this, yes?
Yeah, so I don't want to get into all the machinations of this. That said, if it goes through capital, I just increase the amount that goes to the stabilization fund to match. It's still free cash, right? But I don't want to reduce the amount going into capital stabilization. But again, the mechanism will determine, the committee review will determine the mechanism. And then we also have to get the select board to buy into this and say, we got to do it. We're recommending we do it. I want to be clear. I just think it's the right answer right now. Even in a perfect case scenario, we may not be out of the building for a year. And that's in a perfect scenario with everything gets proved and, funded, just because of supply chain and timing and stuff, right? So that elevator is used literally every day. It's used multiple times every day in a normal course of business.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, that leaves us with a motion to adjourn. Which, I'm sorry, Ellen?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have two quick things. Would you kindly circulate the budget memo? The final budget memo that you and Mary drafted and gave to the select board?
Yep, sorry, I meant to do
Ellen,
that
could you
last week. and I-
sit closer to your microphone? Your voice is very weak.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then I just had another thing, and I don't want to sound like I'm whining, but it's really tough to be completely prepared and getting 19-page documents on civil service and harbor study bylaws, or, day of meeting when I work full time, is a challenge. And I don't know if other people feel it. I can't step away from my work desk for hours at a time to prepare for meetings. I don't know, the civil service document was dated July 2nd. We know it was going to be on the warrant, and it would just be most gratefully appreciated if we could get documentation sooner, if it's available.
Yeah, that point's been made, and we'll continue to work on getting that done because it's important. A lot of it is, well, we need it so we can act intelligently on things. Anything else?
But just to clarify, that civil service memo was updated as of October 25th. So the date on it was, there may have been substantial revisions between July and October 25 when we got it. Or the day before we.
Particularly the approval by the union, but all right, well, but I think the underlying point remains is that the more time we have to study these things, the better we can do our job, so.
Totally agree.
I am amenable to a motion to adjourn unless anybody doesn't have plans for the rest of the evening.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I saw Fran first. I'll take Gene as a second.
Okay.
Roll call vote, Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Ellen Mar,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I am an aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll be back on the 2nd.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.